Most businesses today face two major marketing challenges. One, people are overloaded by information. We're talking about 4.5 billion pieces of new content every day. And two, people have much shorter attention spans and spend only about 8 seconds on anything before they jump onto the next thing. It's no wonder that companies are struggling to get their message heard. The result of poor marketing communications is that half of all new business ventures fail in their first 4 years, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. With this in mind, Visual Storytelling Institute co-founders Shlomi Ron and Alex Caravallo asked themselves, how can businesses connect more powerfully with audiences? Welcome to Visual Storytelling Today. This is your number one source for the latest and most effective business marketing strategies you can apply today to rise above the noise. From video and infographics to augmented and virtual reality, join us every month to meet notable visual storytellers and discover their marketing insights and stories. Here's your host, Shlomi Ron.
Hi, my name is Shlomi Ron. I'm the co-founder of the Visual Storytelling Institute based here in sunny Miami, Florida. We are the only visual marketing think tank that really combines the power of storytelling with the effectiveness of digital media in order to drive business results. What we do is really helping you, the marketer or the entrepreneur, rise above the communication noise with our personalized visual storytelling programs. We leverage this using our signature 9-step My Visual Story framework. So you can connect with your audience, empower their lives, and really grow your company. So today, as we're getting closer to the end of the year, I figured it's probably better, like everybody else, trying to kind of summarize the road they concluded and what's ahead by talking about visual storytelling trends for 2018 and beyond. So one of the things that I'm super excited about is to have my good old friend and digital futurist, Geoffrey Colon. He's a communication designer at Microsoft, to kind of lead this conversation around visual storytelling trends to watch for in 2018. So with that, welcome to the Visual Storytelling Today show, Geoffrey.
Thanks for having me, Shlomi. Good to be here.
Awesome. So we know each other, going back to the IBM happy days where I was heading social and mobile and you were heading strategy on the Ogilvy side. But for the sake of our viewers and listeners on our podcast, maybe you can give us a nice review of your backstory, how you got started in digital marketing, because I know that you have an interesting background starting in the music business even.
Yeah, that's probably where I would begin. I think that's where I first really got into technology, and that was 25 plus years ago, working with a lot of MP3 technology when it was still new.
Yep.
And, Napster was still very fresh in most users' minds. That, I think, combined with a lot of chat rooms on AOL and understanding where search was going in terms of Yahoo and Google when it was really, really new, was probably the infancy of how I got my feet wet into the digital world. And ran my own consultancy for a while, got into a lot of work with digital distribution companies on the web in the early 2000s, when that was a big area of how to actually push content online, which now we almost take for granted in terms of these larger formats that most visual storytellers use. Mm-hmm. Back then, it was much more difficult, I think, to put a video up on the web, especially before pre-YouTube. And then got into the agency world and really got to work with a lot of brands, I think, in terms of how they built their websites and navigated lots of different communication channels. And of course, that led me to Microsoft 5 years ago, and I've been here ever since.
And what do you do for Microsoft today?
I work with Microsoft on what trends are out there, how we take advantage of that, what services we might build, how we communicate to people, since that is a much more difficult task than the old way of sort of PR narrative communications. Now it's really about, what do we create visually so people can understand what we have, what we're trying to say, but also what can we get them to create? I think that's a big part of
Absolutely.
visual storytelling. You and I have talked about quite a bit.
Yeah, no, so this is fascinating. So it sounds like you are really in the eye of the storm in a major corporation where you basically responsible to tell or to evangelize the story of Microsoft and kind of connect with audiences through visual storytelling, it sounds like. Am I right?
Yeah, that is correct. You know, and we have lots of different products and services, and I think each one tries different ways of doing things, and it's really communicating with them that they think of things that might be a little bit more on the edge,
Right.
which of course, you know, we're going to talk about today when it comes to trends for 2018.
Absolutely. So to start kind of the story from the top, you know, just to kind of level set everybody, can you give us your kind of a point of view about what is visual storytelling from your experience, from what you've seen in the marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is how do you connect with people in a way that you're not using words? You know, words are important, but we now know that people learn in different ways. Many of us learn through visual communication. So if you think about how artists used to communicate, they would use a blank canvas to basically evoke a particular feeling.
Yep.
Advertising sort of co-opted that. It took visuals and said, we're going to create a feeling, but we're also going to try to sell a good or a service of some sort.
Right.
Now we've actually moved where we think about art and advertising and how that actually lives within a web ecosystem or some of the new technology that people communicate on, how we reach people on mobile, how we reach people through augmented reality, lots of new ways that that we can get people to feel a certain emotion. But it really comes back down to the visual side of the spectrum. How do we use 3D? How do we use sound? Right. You know, and of course, all this actually starts with words, because you're usually writing what you want to express to someone, but then you're translating it in a way that, well, how does this actually become a visual piece of storytelling rather than a paragraph that in the past we would have issued that paragraph as like an advertorial. Right. Now we're basically pushing things that might be 2 or 3 minute videos. They might be interesting infographics. They might be soundscapes that explain basically the world around us. There's, you know, this is a whole new area that I think we've been able to take advantage of because there's so much technology from a creation standpoint, Shlomi, that we're able to use as storytellers now.
Absolutely. So definitely what you described is Geoffrey really taking care of the visual side of the house in visual storytelling. But can you tell me a little bit more about how storytelling itself, do you find it to express itself in?
Yeah. I mean, I think what it's become now is it's much more of a 360 situation. You can get much more immersive with who you're trying to connect with. Some organizations and companies actually will use material hoping that their audience will respond to them and almost create a two-way conversation. So gone is almost this linear narrative where you're just amplifying what you want to say. Right. And what you have is you almost expect people to converse back and forth with you. This is why, if we think about it, you know, GIF and meme culture is so popular, because you might issue something, someone responds with a visual, you respond to them with another visual. Before you know it, you're communicating. That's really what emojis are. Right. This is, you know, we all have the ability now to have much more of a conversation, much more of a dialogue. And that actually leads to better ideas that companies, if they're actually listening and can pay attention to what people are communicating to them, they can use that as a feedback loop, along, of course, with their own intuition and creativity to create some interesting, new products or solutions. That's the big thing that I think is missing from a lot of modern storytellers is they think about, how does the brand tell a story that people remember? What I think is important is, how do you actually have a conversation that allows you to actually build things that you might not have thought of prior to that conversation?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because in our workshops and programs, what we communicate, at least our definition, is really visual storytelling. It's obviously it's a new label for a methodology that, since the cavemen, one day he woke up and they start painting, the animal he hunted in the morning, right? So the way we kind of look at it is we say basically it's a marketing strategy. It has three components. One is that use the 3-act story structure. And this is something that not a whole lot of marketers are aware, the setting conflict resolution. 2, that you put your customer as the hero of that story. So it's not about you as the brand. It's really the brand serving really as a guide or advisor. It's all about the customer, how they see the world, the problem they're trying to solve. And the last piece is really about obviously using a visual media, could be images, videos, all the way up to AR, to communicate that story across the buyer's journey. So in this way, we try to kind of get a sense of a consensus of what visual storytelling is. But to your point, I totally agree. And this is something that we see a lot, that it's really about the co-creation. So the story is the brands, yes, they are communicating the story. They are the story makers, but once the consumer received it, and as you said, rightly so, they put their personal spin on it, they become story makers by their own right, and then they can storytell it, forward. So it's a dual process that, most consumers wear kind of two hats, story maker and storyteller.
Yep.
So for anyone that's kind of now we kind of spiked their interest about visual storytelling, and they said, okay, I get what it is, but tell me more about how can it support my business objectives? What can I get out of it to impact my business? What would you say?
Well, I think the thing that we have to always go back to is, word of mouth has always driven interest in things, places, ideas. So, storytelling really helps in terms of generating interest or word of mouth, because people are basically connecting with something that they say, wow, this is interesting. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing something, I'm immersing myself in something that's unique. I want to learn more about this business. Yep. That's really from those who don't know who your business is. For those who your customers are, let's say you already have, customer that exists in your ecosystem and they are constantly using your services or solutions or buying your goods, or they support your business.
Right.
Storytelling acts as more of a bond. It's like a glue, because they don't, there's some things that are utilitarian, but people are still looking for more information on how to use it. You and I have talked about this in the past, especially in the B2B space. It's not enough to buy a solution and then say, all right, that customer has all the things they need, we can move on. No, they're actually looking for more storytelling, especially visual representation on what should I do with this now? How do I enable myself so that in my own business, so I can actually make things happen? On the B2C front, people are still looking for tips on a variety of different ways that they can get ahead in business. Mm-hmm. And I think this is where, this visual storytelling really works in both of those areas, either the initial connection, which gets people interested and they want to learn more, or they're already using your service and they want to learn more, and they want to learn it beyond just, we have a new white paper, or go to this section of our website and we have this, or, come see us, et cetera, or come call us. Storytelling now really allows people to, basically educate themselves and do things that don't necessarily require them to constantly have to interact with others. And then, of course, if they do have questions, they're able to then go back and say, okay, I need to learn more. I mean, I think it's just the way that we speak now, Shlomi. I mean, there was years ago that many people out there were saying, like, everyone needs to learn to speak more visually or speak socially. And I think this is really what visual storytelling does now, because it's no longer about, let's just create a memo. Yes,
Right.
memos work, words work, but people are still, they learn in different ways. We now know that people learn through different means. Some people like to read, some people like to see things, some people like to have things explained to them, or a combination of factors. And I think what was missing for a long period of time in the world of marketing was they just were really relying on good copy or good copywriting or good writing. And while that's important, that needs to be the base layer for what you ultimately provide that connects with others in a way that's visually appealing.
Yeah, I really liked what you said, Geoffrey, in the beginning, that, you know, visual storytelling, you know, if you look into figure out your visual storytelling strategy, you know, you really want to build it for each stage on your buyer's journey. So at the top of the funnel, definitely where you create your top awareness, this is really where your story needs to shine the most, because obviously your bandwidth is very narrow. People don't have a lot of attention span at that point, so your story needs to be super quick and impactful. But as you go down the middle of the funnel, once you got them as customers, obviously you have much more bandwidth to tell deeper stories and connect better, and that brings a whole slew of products, from webinars to white papers to, you know, face-to-face offline events, whatever. But so it's really, the visual storytelling strategy is really kind of adapted to the different stages in the buyer's journey, from the top funnel to the mid funnel. So the story kind of almost like an amoeba adapted itself to, you know, to the attention span your audience has and the familiarity they have with your product. So absolutely. One of the things that, you know, since we're talking about 2018 visual storytelling trends, there's a lot of talks about, first of all, you know, we all know that visual storytelling originally emerged from the world of entertainment. You know, if you think about Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey, and how the movie business kind of structured itself. And then now marketers, since they are bombarded with bombarding consumers so much information, it's about time to figure out the new Trojan horse to break through, and visual and storytelling is kind of the lethal combination, right? So when you look at the road that visual storytelling has made so far, what do you see coming up in the future? You know, passive versus interactive delivery pipelines, and especially if you can also address, you know, today's dramatic FCC announcement about net neutrality in terms of
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things is that, you know, in terms of some of the new technologies or things that were on the fringe that will continue to become very popular in 2018, because you have AR capability with ARKit that is available for anyone who wants to develop it for iOS.
Right.
I see that getting more and more popular, mainly because I see more visual storytellers saying, how do we do things on the web, but also how do we do things that might be out in the physical space, again, around contextuality, that people can unlock with their phones. So let's think about physical retailers for a second, Shlomi, you know, because many of them probably might say, what's our use of visual storytelling? You know, we have a store and we need to drive traffic to.
Right.
But if you open up an AR experience that might be in front of your store that you can only see through an AR app on your phone, that opens up visual storytelling to a whole new sector of commerce that maybe in the past didn't utilize it as much as, let's say, more direct marketers or B2B marketers. So I see that as a very big area that a number of new people enter into. I think with video, we've seen that for a while, but I think people are now looking to do things that are very unique and interesting because anyone can shoot a video.
Right.
What's actually going to make that video stick and be more interesting?
What do you think in terms of video like products? Obviously we have the video explainer, the tutorial.
Yes.
Any kind of hot sweet spots coming up?
I think what we are going to see is what we call call and response video. And this actually aligns with the world of artificial intelligence, which is why I think this could be interesting. If we think about artificial intelligence in its most unique and elementary form, if I'm programming a bot and someone types in, how are you today? The bot would basically just type back or respond, how are you today? It's basically call and response. It's the most elementary form of artificial intelligence. I think if video uses this now and someone creates a video and then basically says, what do you think? Or, do you agree? Instead of the comments section on many of these platforms, people actually will respond with video. And what you actually will then end up having is an entire video that is created that starts with that initial question and then has answers from different people that are basically threaded together that someone could then watch and get ideas from. Because if you think about it now, look at the reviews section on like a platform like Amazon. That's pretty crude in terms of how you actually find out information. You have to go through like 2,000 reviews for some of these products. It's almost impossible to weed through many of those.
Right.
I think if they actually move toward, here are the top product reviews and they are in video form and they're short, that gives another way of actually representing yourself in that space. That's an area that I think visual storytellers have to pay attention to. Even if they're not creating those, they have to figure out, how do we get more people to actually review products using video? So
it's like a video testimonial. That's one area that you mentioned. And the other one, which is kind of interesting, it's almost like video bots that kind of remind me, the Serbian chicken on steroids.
That's right. That's right. So, I mean, those are areas that I think we may see more of, just because Snapchat years ago opened up this revolution where short video, about a minute long, became a new way to communicate. And that is now used in a variety of different, business sectors where that's basically common. In fact, I'll even take it a step further where, Google is thinking that search results possibly in the next year or so would actually be a person talking about a particular subject. So let's say we type a query that someone asks the question, what is visual storytelling?
Right.
And you show up as the top search, sort of result.
We actually do for our first blog post, actually.
There you go. And it's you basically giving an explanation in 2 minutes of what visual storytelling is. That is a primer for people to click to find out additional information. So again,
right,
visual, this is an area where visuals actually play more of a way to get people to take action, because they've connected with something where they're like, wow, I do want to learn more. And even if it clicks over to a site where it might be more where they have to read, you're getting them to a place that they may have not gotten to through sort of just the regular means of how search worked in the past. So I do see much more multimedia, which is a huge area of visual storytelling, really being used in some of these sort of areas that we didn't think it would exist whatsoever. So, search engine result pages, product reviews on Amazon. Yep. I think those are things that we should think about, when it comes to next year. I think the other thing we have to think about too, and only a few companies have thought about this, is how are you combining both everything you do visually in a way that can also be represented in an oral or an audio manner, because that is still storytelling that when we think about visual storytelling, you can still tell a visual story with audio. We know this from old school radio.
Theater of the mind, we call it.
Exactly. And I think this is an area that a lot of visual storytellers are going to say, wait a minute, how do we take this story and actually present it in a way where, we're using all these best practices from these podcasts that have been popularized over the past 5 years, where we basically paint a picture in people's minds. That people enjoy that, I think, because I'm wearing my headphones right now. People have a lot of time to actually listen to things when they're doing other things in their life that they may not be able to watch. And I think the smarter visual storytellers are onto that and realize, hey, we need to actually utilize this because we want to connect with people in any sort of condition of humanity that they may be in.
Yeah, in fact, this show is both a video and also an audio podcast.
There you go. Grand example. Yeah, we're following best practices.
We're implementing your gospel, so in a way. So, and what do you think also about, I know that AR, VR is still kind of in the early stages of their evolution, but any kind of advice to marketers, anything they should do today in these spaces?
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting is I found out from a number of AR developers that they said the easiest or most elementary thing that someone in storytelling could do is use an actual physical object that already exists in sort of the physical space. This means, let's say you already have a billboard campaign that exists in a city. You're a local business. You bought a billboard. It's downtown. It's the only thing that you could actually afford. You could actually take that billboard and AR enable that, Shlomi. So you're basically developing something that already on top of something that already exists. Right. And that's very important, I think, for visual storytellers to note, because many times they think they have to go back and create something brand new from scratch. Here, I think it's actually like, how do you enable something that already exists? If you have a physical storefront, how do you actually make the window display so it's AR enabled, so you're not having to create something again from scratch? How do you actually make the when you walk in the entryway, the doormat or something that actually might be there, that is enabled so that it unlocks either more information, or in the case of many physical retailers, it really unlocks basically rewards that you can only get from basically utilizing AR. And what many of these apps actually do is you can collect back-end information, so you have an idea of who that user is, why they maybe use that app, and if they cashed in those rewards. That's another way for physical retailers, I think, to connect a little bit better in a more immersive manner with their customers in a physical space. That, I think, is important to. It's
like geofencing, right? So
exactly. I mean, these are all things that have been going on for years, but now they're just tipping and becoming much more part of, I think, your strategy when it comes to, what do we want to do with our overall, sort of visual marketing for the next, year when it comes to specific campaigns.
Right. So we kind of, you kind of touched on several areas to watch for, the video testimonials, product testimonials, the video bots, how you can augment your existing physical presence in retail with AR or geofencing. When you think about all these trends, can you give us your sense of now looking through the latest announcement and the climate that we live in? So first of all, the FCC announcement, of killing net neutrality, but also the landscape of, fake news. So how those two elements together work to what marketers should be accounting for when they think about visual storytelling, knowing those two elements are in place right now.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing is, the net neutrality repeal is going to make it difficult, I think, for a lot of businesses. I don't know if the FCC has really thought, long and hard that this probably only benefits a few internet service providers and doesn't benefit, large and small businesses who are both, legacy companies as well as, sort of the innovative startups. So to think of, and we have to now think about, what happens if a customer is trying to unlock an experience online, but maybe doesn't have access and our pages are going to load a lot slower.
Yep.
Does that mean that, more companies try to get people to basically do things offline, in an app ecosystem, in an area that they're still taking advantage of sort of visualization, but doing it in a way that, doesn't require all of their customers to try to access things where it may not be equal. Again, I'm speculating here, but if we look at what happened in Portugal, where they sort of carved up the web and repealed net neutrality there. I mean, ISPs have really sort of boxed it all together and have required people to pay more to access certain types of content. That might mean that, putting a YouTube video up may not have as much weight if a customer cannot access that at the equal speed as they had in the past. Right. So we almost have to think about, where could people live on the net as a result of this, and how do we adapt as, visual storytellers to take advantage of this? I actually think it makes alternative ecosystems like applications possibly more popular. I mean, I know we're going through major app fatigue and people don't want to have to deal with that.
Yep.
But some brands might take better advantage of that because you're not necessarily dealing with all the restrictions that you might have to deal with sort of in a mobile internet or a mobile optimized internet area. So these are things I think storytellers are going to have to adjust to. No one is going to get equal access to everything now. So that requires maybe pivoting and saying, well, who could get access to this? Who are basically the gatekeepers? And how does that message then spread offline that we're, utilizing online? A lot remains to be seen here, but it's, now it's part of the equation where you didn't have to think about that prior to this new law. You could basically just say, hey, we're going to actually use the internet and everybody has equal access to it that can get the internet. Now, that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, I definitely, I know that they're going to still, fight this in Congress, and there's definitely a lot of work that still is going on to change this. But, from what you indicated, it sounds like that if you look at, our visual formats that visual storytelling uses today, it's pretty much an exchange of, how big is your bandwidth. So obviously images are very easy to consume, but as you go up to videos and 360 and up, maybe what you're saying here is that those ISPs will deem them as premium services, and again limit the access to them because it eats up their bandwidth. So, and then the counter reaction is, as you said, it's going to move people towards either offline pockets or specific pocket of activities online that maybe offer this, like the good old days. Open access.
And to answer your second question in terms of like fake news and a number of other things, the more I think real things can look, less doctored, more crude.
Mm-hmm.
This plays both into the repeal of net neutrality as well as the battle of fake news. The more doctored something looks and the larger those images are, the more it's going to have trouble, I think, getting to anybody because those images are large, as you said, and they might be dinged as part of a premium service. But also the more doctored they look, the less likely they're believable. And I think this is really where, people are really trying to go back to sort of the crude side of let's not Photoshop everything. Let's leave sort of the flaws in the work that we do. Let's learn from actually seeing how people respond to this. I mean, the best visual storytelling this past year has really been, it's almost like photojournalism. It's real. There's no doctoring whatsoever of it. And I think that's a good learning lesson for everybody in business. Don't doctor everything. Photoshop is not necessarily your best friend. Leaving some of those streaks in the photos or things that you might, there's one person I know who leaves misspellings in all their infographics on purpose just because people are like, wait a minute, this looks like somebody threw it together real quickly. And people basically talk about that and it gets a lot more engagement. And as a result, it's seen by more people. So it's interesting how people actually approach this.
We actually, say the same thing in a workshop. Imperfection and vulnerability is really elements that you definitely want to utilize, and because it really brings up your authenticity and make people, connect with you better. And it's kind of interesting also seeing some of this sentiment also happening in LinkedIn. I know that you are very active on LinkedIn, and we started seeing this with originally we had the classic long form post on LinkedIn, and then people migrated to longer updates.
Yes.
With the 2-line snippets that kind of tell a story. And this is kind of another, evolution in this platform of how people are telling their stories and opening up their experiences and looking for, similar feedback from people who experience the same experiences.
Yeah, I think, there's constant change that is going to continue to happen in this area, like everything. Mm-hmm. Years ago, I would have told you, you need to learn Flash. Yep. You're going to do anything in visual storytelling. Now, that's a worthless, that's sort of a worthless skill, because that's really how most websites were built. Now, I think, it's still important to learn different languages, HTML, maybe Ruby on Rails, Python, things of that nature, especially if you want to have a little bit more of a background, not just in the creative side, but how it might be deployed. But I think even, one area we didn't touch on in terms of trends is, how do you continue to think about verbal our voice enablement skills that tell a story. So let's say I run a business that deals in hardware. Mm-hmm. If I enabled an Alexa, an Amazon Echo skill, and I said, Alexa, tell me the hardware skill of the day, and then basically she told me what tool to use when trying to build something, and I sort of was learning something from that. That's another area of storytelling that I think many of us have to start to get used to is again on that verbal cue side of the spectrum. We have been so entrenched on the video side of the spectrum. We have forgotten that we have intelligent assistants and many skills we can build for those intelligent assistants. And to me, even though that's not an area where a lot of people are necessarily, that area is only going to continue, I think, to grow. Though that is almost like the new operating system. Like
voice recognition, voice activated products.
Yes. Yeah. Even I think one of the things, I've seen educational institutions do is, move into creating Alexa and Cortana and Google Home skills where it's hey, ask us what happened on this day in history. And basically that skill is programmed by them. That's an open area for many, many companies, large and small, to get into. And we would be shocked, or actually I should say to our listeners and viewers, they would be shocked that it's not actually as difficult as we think to program a skill in that area, because most of it has actually been sort of done for us in the sense of machine learning templates that we can copy. It almost reminds me of back in the day, you would copy HTML code and paste it into your website, and you'd have a website built. Now that's happening, I think, with Alexa and Cortana skills, where there's not a lot of coding necessarily required to get one up and running, and she can respond accordingly. And I think that's a huge area for storytellers to really take advantage of, I think, in 2018 as well.
One thing you mentioned that kind of made me think deeper about how, today we have we look at the ecosystem of visual storytelling. We kind of like to kind of break it down to three main categories. Story making, the research folks, people who develop the strategy. Then you have the story visualizing. These are really the producers of the different visual media formats, images, videos, and so forth. And then the last piece is the storytellers, the actual marketers that communicate it to the world. So do you see in the future that, the world of marketing is going to kind of consolidate? Because right now we have a whole separate breed of programmers. You got to know how to code in order to tell rich digital story. Do you see this, whole spectrum of programming moving away and kind of evolve into a natural language? So if I want to create something elaborate, it's going to be like, writing a letter, because, the natural language is going to be communicated with the actual code.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, I think, what we don't talk about a lot in education is that, when we talk about STEM education, people think of coding on a computer where you're typing in lines and lines of code. I mean, that to me is antiquated, because most machine learning understands almost every language in the world already. Why does it understand that? Because every language is basically on the internet or used within search. Search is such a big part of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And if you take that and then say, hey, wait a minute, let's allow dictation, and let's allow people to basically do what you said, what we call latent speech, natural language. Instead of people basically coding where they're using, sort of like programming language
or whatever.
Exactly. You're basically telling a program what to do, and it will mimic that. I know that sounds like it's out of science fiction, but I think that's really what we're working toward. And I can say that, I think, as someone here at Microsoft, I mean, I don't have, I'm not privy to information that on the things that they do, but I know that speech and natural language is a huge part of the next wave of computing. And it would shock me if language or coding was sort of, was trying to mimic what we do now in 2017. If that looked and felt the same in, 2023, let's say, I think it's going to look and feel radically different. So yes, natural language is going to become bigger, and that's actually going to put much more emphasis, I think, on, what is your creative idea? What is your imaginary idea, more than do you have the necessary coding skills to bring that idea to life? Now you got to hire a dev to do that. And in the next 5 years, you may not need that at all whatsoever. I mean, here's a good example. This past year, I developed 2 bots. I have no programming or computer science background whatsoever. I used what basically we have built here, this Microsoft bot framework that allows you to build a bot within our cloud ecosystem and then deploy it across any channel that you want. In my case, I built a bot that I basically embedded on a website, but I could build a bot and use it in Facebook Messenger. I could build a bot and use it in Slack. I could build a bot and put it, basically on any of these third-party ecosystems. If that already exists now, Shlomi, then what's going to exist 5 years from now? I think it'll be radically enhanced. And I think basically what companies like Microsoft and Google and Facebook and Amazon are trying to do is democratize much more of this, so that, if you are a small business or you're an innovative business, you're not being necessarily weighed down with, hey, I don't have the resources to build this. You're basically using what resources are provided.
It's like a WYSIWYG experience that anyone can actually pick up.
That's exactly it. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Because, I mean, think about it. Bots a couple of years ago, you really had to understand specific languages to program one. Now it's really around what do you want the bot to basically ask and answer?
Right.
And where does it scrape for its information? Because most bots are programmed where it can either scrape a large amount of websites, it could scrape the web, it could scrape data systems that you have set up. So let's say you go to like American Express and you ask, what's my account balance? The bot knows who you are because you're logged in, and it can look in the back end system and then tell you, hey, Geoffrey, your account balance is $2,000. So banks are moving more toward these areas now. I mean, visual storytelling, I think the reason it's important to understand this is because ultimately you'll be able to tell, I think, software many more things, and it will be able to actually create some of these systems that we have to basically create by hand now.
Yeah, and that's I really like what you said before about, regardless of the technology of the day, at the end, we definitely want to focus more on the creative muscle versus, the technical know-how. So if you focus strictly on creating a powerful story, regardless of the medium, and I think I agree with you, that's probably the future, because at the end of the day, the story always wins. And, if you give people a better focus on just the story, so that they don't have to worry about, they miss a comma in their code, nothing works.
Yes.
This is really, ridiculous. I mean, it's not a good use of people's times anymore. So yeah, absolutely. So now that we kind of did a very kind of a long deep dive about the trends and what to watch for, maybe kind of to bring this home, can you give us like one or two example of visual storytelling trends that you really like, and kind of explain why?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I'm always fascinated by is still this area of augmented reality and how people are opening up these opportunities. This past year, I think it's still a pretty new area of discovery, but I can't remember the name of the company, but basically they allowed you to open up their product with AR so that you could see sort of how it worked on the inside. It was more of a machine type of company, more of a B2B type of company. I thought what was really interesting there is, some of these systems are so they're so complex. You can't open up, machinery necessarily to look at it. And AR now unlocks that. So I think that opens up areas that we haven't even thought of in the past. Yeah. I think about if you're, what can museums now do with this? You can curate sort of, whole new areas. Book publishers, I think, could utilize it in new ways. Hospitals, I mean, it's an endless amount in terms of what you want to do with that. So I think, that's something I'm going to, continue to pay a lot of attention to. I think the other thing that I really am fascinated by is what we call visual bombing, which is sort of like 3D imagery that you put on the side of a building. Now, some people might say, well, wait a minute, Jeff, that's, I can only do that in one physical location. But what many people are now doing, Shlomi, is they're videotaping this because it looks awesome. And then they're putting these videos all over the web and people can see this. It actually reminds me of like street art from 10 years ago. A street artist would do a piece. They would video the finished piece. They would put it or take photos of it. They would put that they would put that up online on a blog somewhere, and people would, share or comment about it. Now what you're seeing with sort of 3D visual bombing is a lot of people putting up like short videos on Instagram showing like, hey, we did a visual bomb on the side of the Empire State Building last night. Here's what it looked like. And now everybody across the globe can see that, especially if they're following specific hashtags.
So this is projection, right? You're talking about.
So this is projection mapping. Yeah. So this is like an area that I think like most people who are really into visual art or design, it's like, how do you actually take that in a 2D world, but also you're projecting it 3D onto like a structure of some sort. But then you're taking it the next level by videoing and creating a story out of that video that you then share with everyone across the world. I think we're going to see much more of these types of stories really shared, this next year, because people like doing things in physical space, but you're limited by the amount of people that actually might see it. Even if you have foot traffic in a large city like Miami or New York or Chicago,
Yep.
you're only still reaching so many people. You add the video element, I think
The whole world can see it. Yeah.
the whole world can see it. And I think this is an area that companies have really borrowed from, visual artists and street artists from back in the day, and they're just utilizing this. We call this the conjoint effect. It's basically everybody's borrowing each other's ideas because we're much closer together on the web. So that's going to be really fascinating to see if that continues to pick up. But I think 3D, mapping is a huge area that has not been really utilized by as many organizations as I think it could be.
Yeah, it's almost, I think about it almost like a digital graffiti, that it's eco-friendly. You don't really damage any, walls or buildings.
Nothing's damaged. And a lot of people actually, the materials that it requires, it's, a laptop, a projector, usually like a battery, like many times people plug their projector into their battery of a car, and they put everything on like the top of their roof, and they're usually not even like breaking any laws. It's quite funny. I mean, you can do things legal and illegal. I've seen projection mapping where some events have actually said, hey, we want this because we want to basically show everybody who might be walking by what's happening. Right. That's the legal side. The illegal side are people basically projection mapping, without a permit. Yeah. But again, the video aspect gets it out to so many people who normally would not even know about it. And as you know, in our attention economy, that word travels very fast.
Yeah, it's a wow effect, and people like things that it still has a novelty effect, I think. So, no, absolutely. So yeah, I think, we most likely convinced a lot of folks listening or watching, visual storytelling is super going to be high on my list for next year. So if they want to get started, what kind of 3 tips you can recommend for them to focus on?
Yeah, I think the first, look at a lot of different aspects of storytelling, immerse yourself in that. I think the best storytellers are people who actually look and read and watch and view and listen different types of storytelling from different types of companies and whatnot, because it gives you ideas like, hey, why did the company decide to do that? Or that's really interesting. Or why did, that didn't really connect with me. That, that actually, I think, helps you become a better person because you're getting ideas. I think the second thing is, make some of your own content. Even if you don't unleash it to the mass audience, I think it's important to really understand
and pilot.
How do you make this? Yeah. How are you doing? Like, basically, if you think about how, startup ideology works with a minimum viable product, you have to do the same as a visual storyteller. Many of the people I speak to who are really good video makers now started out making the roughest, ugliest, terrible videos ever. But you got to start somewhere, Shlomi. And I think it starts with making things that you're like, I'm just going to show this to a few of my friends. And, you don't have to necessarily release it to the world at large. Yeah. But some people will, because they just are like, well, the only way I can, learn is
get
just
some feedback. Yeah.
I get a lot of feedback that, hey, your videos are too short or they're too long. So is there any way you can find a sweet spot? So like that, I think is important. I think, watching lots of different content, making your own, and then how do you measure it? So basically the third area is thinking about what do you ultimately want to measure, because I still think we're at a crossroads of what is important out there, because once you deploy, visual storytelling elements into the, sort of the ecosystem, what do you want to collect? What's most important to you in terms of tracking? What does success
look like?
I think a lot of times we think about what we're going to create and how we're going to get it out there, but then we don't think about how we're ultimately going to measure it and what we could learn from that. I mean, if you do something that you're like, wow, that took a lot of money and time and it didn't really do that well, the learning is how do you do it that it doesn't take as much money or time, especially if your results aren't going to be necessarily, that good out of the gate. And I think the interesting thing is, in the past, you had to make an expensive piece of content and buy media for it and buy an audience for it. You don't necessarily have to do that to test things in this day and age. The feedback loops are much quicker. This is why you could actually, figure out what's not going to work and pull that quickly before you spend a ton of money on things.
Absolutely. No, these are fantastic tips. So just to kind of summarize for the folks, first, don't be afraid, test your visual storytelling program. Start simple, don't be afraid to break things, because that's how you're going to learn. Check out, feedback from your friends, colleagues, and the most important thing, make sure that you know what success looks like, what you want to measure, how you can, sometimes it has to do also with who is the audience for your product internally. Is it your C-suite? Is it your CMO? Who is that? That can definitely, that is part of the KPIs that you want to bring about as you build a program. So this is fantastic stuff. I want to close with I know that you are currently working on a new book called Visual Bandits in a Post-Advertising World. And this is really nicely connected to what we've discussed this entire 45 minutes. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your book, when it's coming out. And
yeah, well, I haven't started working on it. I'm still trying to find a publisher for it. My agent's still working, with a couple different publishers. Most likely probably won't be out till 2019, unfortunately, with the way publishers work. But the gist of the book is actually not just around what we create visually and what we can create, but will there be emotional analytics down the line to measure many of these things? Because we don't necessarily have that right now.
Right.
So it's almost like a book in terms of, look at all the wonderful things that we can create. Is it really enough to have a heart symbol justify, what is basically created? Is there a better way to get more emotional analytics out of the sort of systems that we create? Because I don't think that we've justified, the amount of content that is out there that is floating through a lot of different ecosystems and channels. We don't really know what necessarily has resonated beyond just sort of simple vanity metrics. So I think it's important, if we're going to put a lot of work into the different things that we do, what will basically be the measurement, or the after effect. And I embedded myself with a couple different people who actually create a lot of interesting content to see how they do it, how they're inspired, what companies sort of pay them to do. I mean, this almost is an area, if we think about, the modern art era of the 60s, you had sort of very interesting artists. You could have that in this area or this part of the world now, where you have people who do both things that are commerce driven, because that's how they make, money. Andy Warhol and Keith Haring were known for that. But then they also do things because they, they're artists, they're visual artists, and they're visual storytellers, and they just want to be able to do that because that's what sort of like drives them to do those things. So I think that's an interesting part of the book too, is that intersection. I always, as you know, Shlomi, from my, first book, Disruptive Marketing, I'm always fascinated with, intersections of life and how people are hybrids, and, can we get more people who are Renaissance men and women and Da Vinci's and all of that? Yeah. And I think this is a huge area where that really can thrive and exist.
Oh, that's awesome. Sounds like really an amazing book, and so timely because, again, a lot of people are grappling with those issues of visual is great, but how can I really connect the dots, both in terms of the analytics, but also, as you said, how can I intersect what I do with another unrelated discipline and create something new and fresh? Yeah. And
also, it's a think about it. A person who wants to do this can come from really any field. You don't necessarily go and train to become this. I mean, a lot of these skills are really learnable and adaptable over time. And I think that's also really unique too, is we're in a time when, the ones who really want to learn the skills will really, I think, take, the most advantage of it. So that's, I think, another part of the book that I'll point out as well is
the entry points, how people can actually get into this world. Yep.
Yes. Not all of them are going to come from necessarily a visual design background. In fact, many of them are coming from like a variety of different areas. I mean, I've had friends who have really become very good photographers who were basically working on Wall Street as investment traders or investment bankers, and just said, like, this isn't really for me. I love, taking pictures. And now they're very, very famous, visual sort of photographers and storytellers. I think the same, I think that can exist, I think, anywhere for people who are really fascinated by this world.
Well said. So thank you so much, Geoffrey. This has been a fantastic time chatting about trends for visual storytelling in 2018 and beyond. And if our listening viewers would like to contact you, what is the best way to do it?
Yeah, you could find me on Instagram at DJGeoffe. I'm also on Twitter at DJGeoffe. And then LinkedIn, heavily active there. Full name, Geoffrey Colon with the G, and last name Colon, Colon.
Awesome. So with that, again, thank you so much. And happy holidays, everybody. And we all wish you an amazing 2018 with a lot of visual storytelling successes. Thank you.
Visual Storytelling Today is recorded in Miami, Florida. The show is published exclusively by Visual Storytelling Institute. Learn more at visualstorytell.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on the iTunes Store. Until next time, don't let your big story wait to be told.